when I look back what happened, like, oh, I didn't know. If I knew back then what I know now, of course I wouldn't do that. But like, I just had to see it for myself. I just could not accept the fact that there was a war. And once I got back, I think the first thing when we crossed the border from Serbia to Bosnia and Herzegovina, it first shocked seeing all these houses burned to the ground, all this line of cars with the people and everybody's like soldiers around. And it's like, I was like, oh my God, like there's a war here.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode number 40 of the Emigrant Slide podcast, where we share stories of people who left their country to chase a better life. And from these stories you can find ideas, resources and motivation to do the same. I'm Daniel De Biasi, and my guest this week is originally from Bosnia, a country that was at the center of the civil war in Yugoslavia between 1992 and 1995. Borjana was 17 when the war started, and her life literally changed overnight. In this episode, Borjana shares a story from the night she was transferred to a refugee camp in Serbia to moving to the United States and becoming a doctor. I grew up in Italy, a country very close to Bosnia, and yet my teenage years were quite different from Borjana's. I wasn't forced to recognize the sound of explosion and shootings to survive in a war, nor I saw people I know dying on the street. I strongly believe that resilience is the emigrant's superpower, and Borjana is like a superwoman. Despite her situation, she managed to create a better life for herself and her children through tough choices and hard work. Borjana didn't forget her roots, and in 2017 she went back to Bosnia as a researcher to learn more about borders and people who want to cross them. She's collecting data with the hope that one day she could help people in the situation she used to be in, having a normal life. And now, without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Borjana. Hi Borjana, thanks for being on the show.
Hi Danny, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. So Borjana, you are originally from Sarajevo in Bosnia, and now you live in beautiful Hawaii.
Correct. I am from Sarajevo, which is capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And now I live in Honolulu, capital of Hawaii. And for the past, this is a year 17th, that I've been living in Honolulu.
So you're now living in Hawaii, but what age did you leave Bosnia?
Well, there was a couple of times. So first time when I was 17, there was a civil war that started, and my parents took me outside of Sarajevo, outside of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, into nearby. Spent a couple of months in Montenegro, which is like one country south of Bosnia, and then a couple of more months up in Serbia. And so that was the first time. So when I was 17, but it was really to save our lives. The war started. It was in the middle of the night when my father woke me up to tell me it's a war. You gotta go. And I couldn't understand. Like, that was Friday on Saturday morning, about 2:30 a.m. And Friday, I remember with my friends at school, we were like hanging out, like we were supposed to have a math test on Monday. And so it was kind of like practicing, studying together for tests. Like, what a last peaceful afternoon to spend with practicing math. I never liked math. And then like next morning, then I never got to see my friends ever again. I never got to set the foot in my high school ever again. So it's like literally my life changed overnight. And we left, but I could not understand that there was a war. And I found a way to go back to Sarajevo. I literally escaped from my mom, from the refugee place that we were in Serbia. It was one small town called Užice. And at first we were in this, it was like a community center turned into refugee camp. There's hundreds of thousands of people. During that time, more than 2 million people got displaced from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I was one of them. But, you're young and you cannot understand what is going on and that there's a war. Like, you just literally taken out of your bed one night. I returned to Sarajevo a couple of months later and then got stuck in a war until the end of 1993. And that's when my family, again, pull me back to Serbia, and I stayed there. That was, I guess, second time I left Sarajevo. I stayed there for 5 years in Serbia as a refugee. I believe it was like a couple of days before of the last couple of days of 1998 when I returned to Sarajevo. And that was a post-war, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's already peace in 1996. And I stayed until 2002. That's when on September 24th, 2002, that's when I left Sarajevo finally. Like, not finally, but for good. And I emigrated to the United States. And here I am, like almost, 2021, like 19 years later. Yeah,
Wow.
Here I am. And 17 of that, I'll be living in Hawaii.
Let's going back to you moving to the US later, but I'd like to ask you the beginning. So you told me that you left Sarajevo overnight. Before that was no like a sign of a war or something, or just you left right at the beginning?
You know, looking back now from this perspective, right? When you know what has happened. So I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore. It was Yugoslavia, right? It was this communist country, Yugoslavia, that was non-aligned, meaning we were not under the Soviet Union, as many people think, especially when I came to the States. Everybody think like that Russia was reign Yugoslavia, which was not true. But in early 1990s, with the fall of Soviet Union, it's kind of like a domino effect, the fall of communism, and Yugoslavia started to break up. So Bosnia and Herzegovina was it was a central republic, one of the 6 republics that made this whole Yugoslavia. And, like the first signs, right, to the first now country, but back then republic, Slovenia, was that separated from Yugoslavia. But that was like really lasted about 10 days. Really quickly they separated. And then it went down to Croatia, and that's where it started. So we saw it, right? We were watching on the news. We knew, people were like, the war started, but you never think it's going to happen to you. Especially for Bosnia and Herzegovina, we were like such a multi-ethnic environment. Like I'm Bosnian Serb, my best friends were, like Muslim or Bosniak, Croats. And I remember, like hanging out with my friends after school or in a cafe. We were talking what's happening in Croatia. And I remember saying to my friends, like, if this mass comes here, like, what are we going to do? There's so many mixed marriages. How do you draw the line between the streets, the building? It was just, like surreal. And I really didn't think it will ever happen in Bosnia. But unfortunately, it did. And it was one of the bloodiest war at the threshold of Europe since World War II. And not just that I was not ready for that, and I didn't believe it was going to happen. I feel that, and with the history show, the rest of the world was not ready for it. Like there was literally all this killing. More than 200,000 people died in this war. Like I said, more than 2 million people became either internally displaced or refugees. Internally displaced is like when you leave your home, to save your life, but you stay within the national boundary of your country. Mm-hmm. And then once you cross, you become a refugee. So I was both. Like during the war, when I returned second time to Sarajevo, I could not live in my home because my home was the front line. Like it was full of the soldiers. And so I was like displaced in some cottage or something, interior, where it was a more homogenous people living of my group, whatever that means now. But yeah, eventually there was like the separation happened, the lines were drawn. So you knew where's our territory, where's their territory. There was a time of cease of fire. There was a time when there was shooting.
So you were a refugee and you kind of were safe, I guess, when you were a refugee. So why did you decide to leave your mom and going back to your country?
That's a really great question. That safe is kind of like really loaded description, whether I was safe or not. Like maybe from immediate shooting or something, but any other. When you're like a vulnerable population, like into, especially being a girl, a female in a different country, you really become target to all kinds of predators, I would say that way. Why did I return? Yeah, for this couple of months, my brother was sick. My mom was there, and my maternal grandma. And it's just that I mentally could not accept that there's a war in Sarajevo. I just could not accept it. I remember crying every day. And then, I learned that, people were coming, same like my dad did, like he brought us to Serbia thinking he put us in the safe place. Safe, like you said, safe. That's, I think, what he thought. And then he returned back, to defend our home. And, we've been living, my family name is Lubora. We've been living like over 900 years in Sarajevo, in that area, in the outskirts, the small village is called Krupa. It's like on the outskirts of the city of Sarajevo, near the airport, where the airport was. So I just could not accept that. I just could not accept that there is really war. And I feel I was not the only one. I guess maybe I was one of the very few crazy. I know that there are other friends who returned into the war. I think that's how I am and who I am. If I set my mind into something, I would just go ahead and do it. And I just could not understand that. And during that time, from the first shooting, I was 17, right? I was still minor. But during these first 20 days, I turned 18. So I was like, I remember saying to my mom, like, you can't do anything. You can't keep me, like legally, I'm an adult now. Like the things you say only when you're 18, 17, 18. Like, oh, I'm having 3 kids, right? And the one is 27 almost. The other is like turning 18 this year. The youngest is 15. So yeah, I hear these. I'm an adult, and just when I look back what happened, like, oh, I didn't know. If I knew back then what I know now, of course I wouldn't do that. But like, I just had to see it for myself. I just could not accept the fact that there was a war. And once I got back, I think the first thing when we crossed the border from Serbia to Bosnia and Herzegovina, it first shocked seeing all these houses burned to the ground, all this line of cars with the people and everybody's like soldiers around. And it's like, I was like, oh my God, like there's a war here, and it got even worse with the time, like once I got into Sarajevo, like, yeah, I literally went all the way down to Sarajevo, and it's pretty quickly I understood like what I did, and that the life had changed, And then once in a war, like really quickly, your survival kicks in. I think we're always in some kind of survival mode. In a war, there's a different way you think about life, different way you think about everything. It's your conscious completely changes once you're in a war.
And were you able to rejoin with your dad, or you were just on your own?
I was able, but my dad was, like I said, he got some little cottage because, like I said, from the time when I left first time and I come back, the sort of like these boundaries between the 3 ethnic groups were like created. And so where my house was, like I said, I was living on the outskirts. When my house was, that was literally front line. But like people know each other, like they were literally neighbors against neighbors, You literally have half of the building that is on one side, half on another side, half of the street on one side, half of another side, right? We will come so close to the border, right? That you can hear people talking on the other side, right? And but I guess that's what war does.
So I guess you managed to find your dad just because you went to your own town and people knew him, and so it did.
Oh yeah, everybody knows. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was your original question. I was like, why was I telling you that? Yeah. So everybody knows everybody. Like I said, there's like whole village. Half of the village is like the family Lubora. Everybody knows everybody, and even the other. That's where my elementary school was. That's where I grew up. Like everybody knows everybody. So it's pretty much easy, to know where's who. I mean, unless they were like somewhere on positions, somewhere in the tranches fighting out in the mountains or whatever, woods, forests, So they would go for a couple of days, fight, and then they would have a day or two off. That's when I would see my dad. Yeah. I wish sometimes he just sent me back immediately, but for whatever reasons, he didn't.
Were you able to go back?
No, I was in Sarajevo, but like I said, it was on the outskirts. I would come. There was a portion of the cities that I was able to go to. Like in a war, you learn where's the sniper shooting, where's when and where the grenades are falling. And most of the time, you learn how to deal with it. You learn to distinguish different sounds of different bullets, whether it's coming from the shotgun or from grenade or from the sniper. And if it's during the day or it's at night, during the day you hear like a whistle, it's going to hit somewhere near. So you just lay down to hide, just to put the shelter somewhere, whatever that's closest. At night you see as lightning, you kind of see it before you hear it, before it hits at night. So that was kind of differences that you have. And you just, after some time, you learn to live that way. So I was there until the end of 1993.
Oh, wow.
So sometimes it's summer 1992 to the end of 1993. And that's when my mom was able, I don't even remember any more details, but I know it was my uncle, my dad, and they found a way somehow. They transferred me back to Serbia.
But were you able to move to Serbia before that, or you were stuck in Bosnia?
So I was there stuck until 1993, and then they were able to get me out after a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Do you remember why you were stuck in Bosnia?
Don't know why. It was just I was there. It's just that I was there, and I was just there. Also, during that time, I fell in love, of course, and why I'm saying of course, but it's it's a war. It's a different way of living. And I stayed, maybe that was also the reason that I was hoping, that I was staying and didn't even think up until to the point when later on, I got pregnant. And so there was no food, there was shooting all the time, and I was pregnant. It was really tough time. And that's when they started thinking to how to transfer me to Serbia. That was the kind of in a nutshell how I stayed that long. Just a good question. I never asked myself that question, but probably that's what it was.
So when the war was over, I guess you were not able to go back to a normal life because the country was probably needed to be rebuilt. But how was your?
Oh yeah, I think country is still rebuilding, and it's gonna take a while before it's ever even close to what it was before war. When actually I did not go back for good to Sarajevo when war was over. It was Dayton Peace Agreement was signed in November 1995 in Paris, and I think it went into effect in March sometimes in 1996. But as you can imagine, it was really, the new boundaries were drawn. The country was split into two, into the Republic of Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So there was there was mass movements that were happening that, because under the territory of Republic of Srpska, so that territory and people within that territory are under the administrative power of, Republic of Srpska, and then you have territory of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is under different administrative power of Federation. And you have 3 presidents, many cantons. It's just one mess overall. And it was for a long time, I didn't have where to return, right? There's no jobs, there's no nothing. There was not the ideal situation in Serbia either, but it's it was really, really bad in Sarajevo. And then I finally returned close to the end of 1998 when there's a job opportunity opened up because, the peacekeeping forces started like NATO and US started like placing thousands of peacekeeping forces, stabilization forces, or whatever that they were called. They keep changing name from S4, K4, and all of these different acronyms. But pretty much it's like peacekeeping, peace building, peacekeeping started happening after the war. And so international community came in, right? And really near my house, there was the biggest US military base. Now it's the biggest NATO base. So I knew a little bit of English, and the opportunity opened up that I could go work in base because it was really, really bad in Serbia at that time, really bad. Serbia was under embargo. People are hungry over there. And in addition, hundreds of thousands of us refugees that we came. And you're like, when you come uninvited, you're not welcome anywhere. And so the same with the refugees. And so, so that's when I returned to Sarajevo. And it was quite challenging and quite different. I remember being really scared because the first base that I started working it was US base, but it was not the one that is near my home, but it's in a part of the town that after the Dayton Peace Agreement was belonging to Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We had a shuttle that was taking people, after you finish shift and bringing you for your shift into base. You're with this international shuttle, right, protected. They had people with the guns in. I remember, I think the French, because there were people all over the world. I remember working there, I kind of learned to distinguish different uniforms from all over the world. Like if I see uniform pattern, persons coming in, like I know from what country they're coming from. So I remember the French people were the ones that they escorted shuttles, that they were driving us, pick us up to work. And then if you're working like second shift, if you finish at dark, they would like drop you off right outside of your door. So you're safe, right, when you're moving around.
So even though the war was over, it was still not a safe place to be.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That first couple of years, yeah. And I mean, probably even more. First of my couple of years, like remember 98 to 99. So, like they were borders, like border literally passing through my house. Like my mom's house actually was my uncle. He died, so... And that's where my maternal grandma, that's where I grew up with them. So it's like really literally passing through the yard, through the kitchen, the border. There is no border on the ground, right? The Sarajevo is split on two with this inter-entity border line, IDL, how they call it. But you kind of know, during the day, okay, you go to town and stuff. But when dark comes down, you stay on your own side. Like you don't want to be at night on the other side. It was just that fear, right? Now it's different. Like now it's way different. Now it's like the border is still there, right? And there's some other things that you can see that it's a difference. You're on a different side of the border. But yeah, it was really scary during that time. Like I said, today, like the base is still there. There's much less soldiers. I don't remember like what the numbers are. But the NATO base is still there.
So at this point, you were back in Sarajevo. You already had your first child, I guess, right?
Yes.
When did you decide to leave Bosnia and to move abroad?
I was thinking all this time, like even when I was, like I gave birth to my son, 94 as a refugee in a hospital, that there was nothing, no anesthesia, no medication, nothing. It was overall an awful experience. And from the moment that I gave him birth, like I kind of knew I wanted to better, future for him. And it was my dream and my goal as a little kid, like I was a good student for most of the part, but like I had this dream, I want to become a doctor. And I was really ambitious, and war shattered that. Like in the war, I was like really, you wake up in the morning and you touch yourself. It's like, okay, I'm alive, right? So that's all of this, we have like just basic survival first, that you're alive and then that you have something to eat that day, which most of the time you didn't. And it was not much different. Like in Serbia, there were days when I didn't have anything to give for food for my child. And so during all this time, like I was really wanted to find a way to give a better future to my child. I wanted him to be able to have a choice. And so I had this dream, and I tried while I was a refugee for these 5 years. I applied everywhere. I applied as a refugee, like to be relocated to the third country. I applied to through the IOM, International Organization for Migrations. And that's what I think the further I got was the interview with the IOM. But according to them, I was not suffering enough in a war to qualify to get relocated. So, which meaning nobody tortured me, nobody raped me in a war. So it's only the ones who suffered the most, they would get opportunity, or if you're a mixed marriage, right, to leave. And so I wish so many times, like if I had gotten that chance, I think this was 95, how my life would have like turned differently. I tried to apply to the US, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. I don't know why the Europe, I guess it was there were no programs to apply for Europe, right? And I had many of my friends, that we met either in a camp or, in town I was living, that they were refugee, or we met at the Red Cross, where you would go like every month to get some ratio of your food, a couple of kilos of flour or, like salt or some clothing or stuff. And so that's how you meet people, right? Like, refugees, and they would get these paperwork and visas, and I tried and never got it. And I tried for 5 years and never got it. But like I never given up on this idea, right? On this desire that I want to take my child out. I want him to have an option. And I didn't know like what's going to happen in the future. I didn't want him that he has to take a gun and be forced to choose the sides and to fight. And so I wanted him to be out of all of that. So that was that desire that was always, always with me.
And how did you manage to go to the US then?
Oh my God. Long story short is I came on to I met a friend who helped me out and I came to the States.
Can you elaborate that more? Can you tell me more or no?
So I met a friend. I was working at... this was my second or third job. So I was working for it was a free shop. It was an international company from Monaco, Monte Carlo. So they had this big military base, US base, in a Butmir, that's part of Sarajevo. People who know Sarajevo, they know where that part is because that's base Butmir is now a NATO base. So they had a small wing with Italian Carabinieri.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started working at the free shop at some point. I think it was like 2000. And so I was working there. So there was the only one American captain that worked there. And I met him. I knew him, I remember working. It was like a shift. And we had like 6-hour shifts that we were working there. So I was also translator and liaison for our company and working at the free shop. So we would like chit chat at the shop, right? And we were friends, really, what I thought we were really good friends. And, I shared, like he knew I had a son and we were the same age. And he knew I wanted to my dream at that time I was already, I started law school. So in 1999, I started law school. So I was third year law school when I decided to leave Sarajevo because I was going at 4 a.m. in the morning, listening to the classes and coming afternoon working there. So I was really working hard. I wanted to finish college. I wanted to finish law school, all trying to build a better future for my child. So my friend, he knew that I wanted to, that's my goal, my desire, that I always wanted to pull child outside from over there. So I don't know, the friendship turned into, he left, but we were in contact every day on the phone. And just maybe a year after he left, almost 2 years, he literally proposed me over the phone. Yeah. And so I decided maybe if I was not in a position, this is really important, that when you're coming from developing world, then maybe you're making some choices that you wouldn't otherwise, right? In order to how hard it is as a, like not being able to get the visa, not being able to go anywhere because you're not welcome anywhere. So you might make choice, I made the choice to trust this person that I knew, like I just saw him at my work, right? We did spend hours talking on the phone, but like I didn't know who he was. I didn't know where I was going. So, and I accepted and I got the visa. And in September, I left, September 2002. So I left and I came to the States. Like I quit law school, I quit everything, and I came to the States. Yeah, that's how I.
Oh, wow. Thanks for sharing that. Does that mean that the father of your child wasn't in your life anymore?
So we were like sweethearts, big love and everything. But I thought that there was like more to life than the environment I grew up in and I married into was extremely conservative. What I mean by that, it's like once you marry, not necessarily is like that today, but once I married, I kind of lost my name in the sense of like they wouldn't call me by my name, but by the name of my husband. Mm-hmm. Like I was belonging to him. Hey, like that's wife of so and so. So like there's no you use your name. So that tells you like how you became the property in a way. That's so much change now. But this is what I was, like found myself situation into. And I was like, that's where I start questioning like, oh, it's this life, like I want to go to school. I want to do this. I want to do that. And so I, like he wouldn't come with me. He wouldn't, he's out of picture ever since. Even though, like we're from the same village, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't even make problem when I needed his permission to bring my child here to the States. And my son was 9 years old when I brought him to the States. I brought him 6 months after me. I came first to see where am I going? I didn't drag him first. I wanted to he was all that time he was in Serbia. That's a whole another story. He was with my mom in Serbia. So he was still, even though I returned to Sarajevo, he was still in Serbia.
As a refugee?
Yeah, he was still there. And I brought him directly from Serbia to the U.S. because the life in Sarajevo was not that good at that time.
So once you moved to the U.S., did you pursue your career as a doctor?
Yeah, that's a good question. Did I become a doctor? Yeah, I was on that track. And this is, I hope that, whoever listens to this is the one thing that I can say is like, no dream is too big that you cannot achieve it. And just really, please believe in yourself. Don't listen to others. So when I came, I started school and I started first with English. My English I knew some, but like it was nowhere near, for me to complete TOEFL, the language test or to get into college and stuff. So at first, like a couple of years was studying language itself. And I wanted to be a doctor. But then after 2 years, we moved to Hawaii. I married the friend. If anybody can see me now using quotation mark, right? The friend, which I thought it was my friend. I married and we moved to Hawaii because he was military, got stationed here. And I had 2 kids. When my daughter was born, 6 months later, I started college. That's when I was able to start college. And I was on a track I was microbiology major at first and wanted to go to pre-med. And I started first at community college, but on my first semester, I accidentally, I was working with advisor, I was registering late. So the one class that fit that time, that I could in my schedule was geography class, right? I took it and taking that first class in geography, I fell in love with geography. And it was a great professor who he asked me to be tutor for geography courses after I finished. And then I ended up taking all geography courses over there. And I wanted to combine, medicine, the medical geography. And when I moved to University of Hawaii at Manoa to the Geography and Environment Department my senior year, actually, I didn't move to geography first. I was microbiology, like I said, and I was pre-med student, so I still wanted to. And I remember that first semester at the UH, I talked to my pre-med advisor, And she told me that, well, I was 32 at the time. And she said, well, you need like 2, 3 more years to finish this. And then, like the years of med school and stuff. And she's like, maybe you want to reconsider. I really now, when I think back, to any advisor out there, don't never do that. Don't ever tell you're too old to go to school. If I had continued, I would have been doctor by now. But no, I had that. And also I had my husband at the time, he also said oh, how long do you think you're going to go to school? And so I decided to quit microbiology major after first semester. I turned to geography. In the longer run, it worked much better. I completed my undergrad in GIS remote sensing, geographic information system and remote sensing and cartography. Because like I said, the boundary goes through my house with the Dayton Peace Agreement. So I wanted to know, who made these borders, how they could just draw a border through the house. So I went on and studied that. I studied GIS. And GIS was really, really, I could say diaper at that time. It was really not developed. And later I learned it was just some kind of military guy who did his master's in GIS, and he just finished his master's. He was the main guy with the map for drafting the Dayton Peace Agreement. And it was just a strict military male perspective, not even looking what's going on the ground. So that's what sent me to be interested in cartography and stuff. And then I completed my master's. And then second in conflict resolution at Matsunaga Institute for Peace. And that's where I'm teaching now as well, peace conflict resolution classes. And I took a couple of years break. I went with kids to Bosnia and went through the divorce and stuff. And then I started teaching geography courses at the same classroom where I took the first class at the community college and at university. So I never thought of being a teacher. I never thought of being a professor, right? And after a couple of months, I realized this is what I want to do. I really realized that was my world. That was amazing. And somehow it came naturally that I decided to take a next step to do my doctorate. And here I am now. I'm a PhD candidate. I study migrations. I think it's kind of leading migrations and border. For my doctoral, I study the migrants along the Western Balkan route. So it's kind of like 2015, 2016 when the mass people on the move started coming through the Western Balkan route, through Serbia, and in 2018 through Bosnia and Herzegovina. That is what I'm doing now for my PhD. So hopefully in about a year, I should complete my doctorate. So I am really close to become a doctor, but also, I given up many years ago from the track of MD because somebody told me I was too old. And that was just a point I want to say, you're never too old. I'm now couple of days turning 47. I'm in this community, right, of young girls seeing on Instagram or on social media who are PhDs and doctors. And, you see these questions oh, I'm 30 or I'm late 20s. Is it too late? It's never too late to get your education. It's never too late to do what you want to do and just not listen to anybody, what they tell you. I wish somebody told me that 15, 20 years ago.
Do you feel like it was actually a good decision just because you like the field that you're doing now, or you're regretting that you quit?
Well, we will never know. That's the thing. I think in life, we regret things we didn't do. We didn't even try more than things we did and fail, right? So it stays with me for the rest of my life now to think that what could have or should have happened, right? If I had decided to go that, and I will never know that. So I made a peace with it for myself. I say it's not too late, but now, like you said, I don't have those interests. Is it too late now to go to med school? I'm thinking no, I would have if I had that, desire, but I don't have that desire anymore. But I will always ask, myself, what if I did go that way? What if I didn't give up and switch the majors? And so for that reason only, don't let anybody to tell you you're too weak or too young or too whatever to, because you're not. We pretty much can do anything we want to do. So I am definitely happy with the major I'm doing now, with what I'm doing now. Like being a refugee, being on the receiving end of all this humanitarian, so-called humanitarian help organizations, and being actually managed. They were managing me for so long, which put me in such a horrible life situation as a refugee that I don't like to talk about it. I think I definitely feel I am in a better, I am where I'm supposed to be, in what field I'm supposed to be now. So I'm happy for what I'm studying and being that subaltern voice, for refugees, for people on the move, for migrants.
Because even what was a couple of years ago that you went back to Bosnia to study, to do your research, right?
Yeah, I spent 2017 and 2018. Yeah, I was doing research. I was in Serbia and Bosnia on multiple occasions.
And what were you studying there? What were you researching?
I was actually documenting, observing. I did my ethnographic work. I was documenting everyday life of people on the move that are passing through the Western Balkan route and their way to the European Union, any country of European Union, because Bosnia and Serbia and those are countries that are still developing and the economy is poor for the people who live there. It's like similarly when my situation was, right? When I was a refugee in Serbia, it's just different. Now you have people with a completely different background, different culture, language barrier, and they don't want to stay there. They don't want to be there. They just want to go to somewhere in Europe, to some poor country where they can do the same thing that I wanted, have a security, have a better life for their children, themselves, and better condition of life. It's interesting. Every young girl, that I interviewed had the same dream like I did back then, to have a better life and to get education. They want to be pilots. They want to be engineers. They want to be doctors. All they want to go is be like any other peers of their age, similar age, and just go to school. Instead, they're stuck in refugee camps, in the jungles along the borders, subjected to structural border violence and pushbacks, because these bumper states, Croatia and Hungary, right? They're they close the borders, so the migrants cannot cross legally, so they try illegally, and the border police is beating them up, pushing them back, and it's whole stories that going on behind it.
So I guess you going there and interviewing these people, I guess you were like an inspiration for these people, because you lived the life that they're dreaming of.
I returned to Serbia in 2017, 25 years after I set the foot as a refugee there, and I was not able to go anywhere. And there was no such thing like I crossing border illegally back then. Not illegally, but this clandestine way of crossing the border as we see it today. It is just for their part, yes, it was inspirational because, they see me, so they see hope. They see hope that maybe one day they're going to be successful like that, and they're going to be in my shoes and be able to be free. And it's really sad. All of a sudden I was free and I could travel wherever I want. But I feel like same Borjana, but I just had this different passport. I had a different piece of paper that was American passport. And that shouldn't be the case. It's like a basic human right that people move through the spaces. And that's how humans evolved, through the mobility, right? Moving through the world, and we shouldn't draw the boundaries and limit people who can pass, who cannot. So they definitely did see that inspiration. But also what was really the hardest for me is that lots of people thought that I can give them some ad hoc help, right? That I can help them, and I cannot help them. I'm doing this for educational purposes, right? So with the hope eventually, but academia is like that, it's really slow, and hopefully that's going to impact some policy changes, migration policy changes, and so on and so forth. And to tell these people's stories, right? to going back to original thing, that was the harder part. I could not help them right there, right? So there's a way in academia, like there's hope to change, to make some changes, but it's really slow, painful and slow. And so it was hard for me spending day at the refugee camp, talking with these people, with women, with girls, with the children and everything. I could see my mom and myself. I could see young me having this hope and, not knowing what is next, what is happening. There's a lots of minor boys as well now along the Western Balkan, as young as 9 years old. They're subjected to all kinds of awful things along the way. Mostly the migrants are coming up from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Pakistan. People are trying, they want, like everybody else, like you and I, it's just a better life, right? Better conditions. So the family with 4, 5, 6 children, 10 children would send this one kid, they would borrow money that's in cost to cross, and it's lots of violence at the border. It's just really, really tough along the way. And so, yeah, it was hard for me. It was a hard experience, knowing what it's reality and not being able to help. But the only way I could help is like to record their stories, like to write it down and to tell their stories, to tell their perspectives. And because the people on the move are moving, they're going to find their way. I found my way eventually to move. And these people are finding their way to move. I have a few people that I follow, that are now in Paris and France or in Belgium or in Spain, that I follow their journey, right, from Serbia through Bosnia through, and now in Europe. And once they cross in Europe, that's not bright either, the people living on the street of Paris. And it's just overall a situation. It's really hard, really harsh for so many people as we speak now.
And you were lucky enough to be able to leave your country, live, let's call a better life in the US. But do you miss your country? Do you miss Sarajevo?
There's a couple of things there. When you said you're lucky, like I was thinking about that, like I wouldn't call myself lucky. Like I really work hard for it to find a way to leave. I would maybe consider my son to be lucky, that I work hard to bring him here. So he didn't feel that. I tell him many times, like the kids your age, they're like beaten up right now. And lots of them die along the border, right? And some that we know, and that there's records of, some that there are no records of. They drown in the rivers and die in the woods and forests. And, I see these pictures of dead bodies, the migrants sent to, there's joint groups and stuff that I'm part of on Facebook and WhatsApp and other, like applications. And it's horrible. Nobody talking about. In that sense, I consider my son, for example, him be lucky to be here. These 2 kids that I got after, it was like, you're lucky because you were born in a core country. Like you got that passport just by coming out of your mother's womb, like you got that right for what I had to work really hard to be where I am now and perhaps marry the man that I wouldn't have otherwise ever, right? In a hope to, get a better life for my kids.
I didn't mean to say you were lucky that I didn't mean that you didn't work hard or just like lucky to being able to actually.
Yeah. I see what you mean now. Yeah. Do I miss Bosnia? I miss a lot. Like I have feeling that if there was not the war, I would never thought of leaving my country, right? I never once crossed my mind before war. And I was teenagers. I was watching, Beverly Hills 90210 or something. It was like with these teenagers. Like that, yeah. And so they were starting high school and I was starting high school. So we were watching that out of our 2 little channels we have. Somehow we were lucky. We had that show. And so I was seeing how, it was like just in the movies. I never thought that's real life, like that's even possible. People really live like that, but obviously they do, right? But I never really thought of living anywhere. It was not common. My family and, my father had like 5 sisters and brothers, my mom's side, and like we were all cousins there, lots of us. And every weekend getting together, for barbecues and stuff. And I have in a sense, part of my childhood was I really like it. I have happy memories, part of my childhood. But I never thought like of leaving. And I think just going for a better life and then doing it for your child because you want your child to have an option. I always felt like I had to leave, like I did not have a choice. I had to leave Bosnia in a sense. So I'm missing it. I always do. But now I have like kids are here, their lives is here. And I'm finishing my school. Like I develop life and career here. I teach at university. This is my 7th year now. And, like my kids are here. My oldest is turning 27 in a couple of weeks. Like he's married, he's here, his life is here. Yeah, I'll try to go visit more often. But definitely my plan is to retire in Bosnia, one day.
What's the thing that you miss the most?
I miss the people, the community, my friends, laughing, way of life, which is nowhere near here, like over there.
What do you mean by that?
Here's it, I think it's most of the core countries, like maybe even in Italy a little bit, like it's individualistic country. Well, maybe not so much Italy, like family is really important and stuff. But like in America, it's really individualistic country. Like there's not so much feeling of community. Like if you want to go to have a coffee with somebody, pretty much you have to put in a schedule and a calendar, right? And like back home, you don't have to do that. Like your friends can just show up at your door at any moment and you can do the same, right? You can just go and have a coffee. It's like similar like in Italy, there's so many like little shops outside, like the urban centers. Here, like you have this completely different way of living, even though gentrification started now a little bit, bringing the life to the city centers. But here's like suburban areas. You have to drive forever, everywhere, 2 hours to one way to work. And then you have to drive to the mall somewhere to go shopping. You have to drive everywhere. Where back home is like you live and you down below are shops, you walk and, it's just that sense of community that I miss. And then, of course, like food, even though I try to cook a lot Bosnian food here for my kids. So they don't, I was one of these generations, like that you had to learn really early how to cook. So my kids are lucky in that sense that I know how to cook. Not that I cook often Bosnian because everything is from scratch. Everything tastes forever. But yeah, so it's, I guess that's just a way of living, way how people are like really easily like spontaneous, make celebrations. It's enough you have like 2-3 friends, some music, and voila, there's lots of laughter and lots of like it. I like that here. I have great friends here and I met them, but it's completely, like I said, everything is scheduled, everything is planner. Like everything you have to put from minute to minute. That doesn't exist in Bosnia. I don't think so. I mean, yeah, that's not on the books over there. So it's like more spontaneous, more people are opening. My kids, when they became a little bit, the 2 little ones, the youngest one, when we went for the first couple of times to Bosnia, they were like, oh my God, everybody loves us there. Like, and we have so many uncles and aunties, everybody's like, when they see them, like, oh, little Americans, they hug them and, so it's like people are more open and friendly. And I think that's what I miss. But definitely, for education, for school, for economy, yeah, my kids didn't used to be there. So I don't think so. It's definitely better schools for them here and better colleges and stuff. So I'll stick around for a couple more years until they're all in colleges and out of the house. So then hopefully find a way to go back. Spend some more time during the year back home. That's the goal.
How often did you usually go back before COVID?
Before COVID, well, I maybe went for all these times. I'll tell you now, not so many trips because we're in Hawaii. Number one, not just that it really takes forever it's on the other side of the world, but it's extremely expensive, it's extremely expensive to travel for kids. And so I was maybe all together, let's say 5 times all together. And usually like, I don't know, once every 4 5 years, which is really a lot, like I missed so many different things out there. But, like the parents are getting older and it's just, yeah, I miss whole lot of life of being there. I would just wanted to spend more time in a year of the year.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And do you feel lucky to be an immigrant?
In a way, yes. In a way, no. Like you're really, once you leave your home, once you emigrate, right, you're sort of like always this diaspora, right? This Gastarbeiter, how the German says, or like you're no longer local in a sense, because I was like, oh, you are Americanized, anything that you try to maybe do better or do not better, let's say do differently. They're like, oh, like look at her, like she emigrated. But then here you are immigrant forever. You are foreigner forever. Like no matter that I got my citizenship in 2007 and that I got all these degrees, like college, bachelor's, 2 masters, PhD now, it doesn't matter. Once I open my mouth and my accent comes through, everything else falls down. And you get to be discriminated, like when it comes to job interview or anything, it's like definitely you are not in the same rank as a native or as an American who was born here. And you're in some twilight zone, I would say. Like you're not belonging there anymore, but then you're here. Always that kind of feeling that you're a foreigner. But I'm lucky. Consider myself lucky because I have that choice, right? That I can plan. I have a choice, definitely. I'm lucky for that, right? That I can educate myself, that my children can go to school, that we have an opportunity. So I am lucky in that sense. I have a lot more choices than my brother, for example, back home. Like I'm in America 19 years. I was never able to bring him as a tourist just to visit to see. Like he got 3 times rejected visa.
Oh, wow.
Just as a tourist to visit where I live. He was never able to come because, like he's young. He doesn't have millions in a bank. And so he cannot come.
Oh, that's crazy. Even like showing your family this part of your life, it's crazy that you can't.
Yeah, it's my brother. Yeah, my mom came. She came, visited several times, and stayed sometimes 6 months. At the time, so she got visa. But I guess because she's older, and and she would never live in America. She's back home. But she didn't have an issue. But my brother was never able, and then we given up. Like this was at the beginning, and I never even tried after. So
that's crazy. And last question: do you have any particular advice you'd like to give to the listeners that maybe they're thinking to move abroad?
Like I said already during our conversation, like people are dreaming of moving abroad or changing. Like the countries. It's never too big of a dream. It's doable. But it's really what it takes. It takes to take risk and get out of your comfort zone. And it's definitely, that's the only way to do it. And I would definitely advise for anyone who listens to this and thinking of moving somewhere else and trying somewhere else to do it, to find a way and to do it. Because like I said, even if they fail, at least they know they tried. I'm thinking so many times, and I talked about this with my oldest child, because he was 9 when he came. So he got to experience school and system and life over there. And then he came here. And we went through the really tough life, really hard life once we got here. It was really, really hard. I was for years living in domestic violence. And being an immigrant, coming from another country, that's like adds to it. And both him and I have really, really hard life here, which is for whole another topic. And sometimes I ask myself, did I make a mistake, right? That I brought him to the States and he would always say, Mom, like, despite everything that had happened, like, he would always say, I'm glad you did, it's worth it. And that's the one thing that keeps me, going, that he has a choice. He has a choice that his peers don't have back home choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, in a way, for me, at least, I guess, the good confirmation that despite of everything, making that decision to quit the job and pack up 2 suitcases and move to the country. I didn't know language. I didn't know anybody. I really didn't know anybody. It was really tough. But it's worth it. At least you're going to know. Even if you come and you don't like it, you can always go back, right? What's worse that can happen, Like, try it. Don't sit sometimes in an old age and reflecting on your life and thinking like, oh, what would have happened if I, made a decision, if I left, like how my life would unfold. At least now even if it fails, you would say like, okay, I tried,
Exactly.
You can tell the story, how you tried, how you failed, but you learn, and then you kind of like made peace with yourself, right? Either you're over there or you stayed or you return. But I think it's worse to just asking yourself, what would have happened if I did do it? Why I didn't, I think regrets is worse than failure.
Mm-hmm.
And failure is a lesson. Failure is another way to learn something new and grow out from it. And, when one door closes, there's always another door opens. And there's always like just that first move, that first step when you want to go and move and do something. It's like a snowball effect. It's going to bring in something else. It's going to bring in something new. I mean, look at me. If I didn't always make these steps forward, even though like they're so crazy as returning to Sarajevo in the middle of the war, who knows what would have happened if I did stay in Serbia. I don't know what would happen. Maybe I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing my doctorate. My child wouldn't be in America, so it's good I did it. And from each step, I learned something new. I grew from it, from each step along the way. And I'm still believing in people, and I'm still believing in kindness and love. And despite what happens to you, to any person, I still believe they're good people. And that's what really kept me going along the way. Yeah, I met some really bad people, some really bad things happened to me, but I also met the really amazing, inspiring people. And that's the energy that I was trying always to keep, that positive energy. So this is not cliche, but it's like when something like that happened, there's always, same like a night and day. There's always cycle. It's not dark forever. There's a day, and the same with life. So nothing lasts forever. Not problem, not obstacle, not bad situation, not happy situation. Like there's always these oscillations, right, that we have in life. And I think it's, instead of like fighting it, if we embrace it and take a lesson, take a best out of it with us as we're moving forward, it's like, and understand that that's life. That's life, goes up and down all along. And it's so short and it's so unpredictable. So just live it. Just go for it.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Actually, there's a quote that I really like, which is an Italian quote. I tried to translate it in English. It's like, there's not night long enough to not allow the sun to rise the next day.
Yeah, and that's perfect. That's exactly what I meant with this. Like,
sounds better in Italian, though.
I know there's so many of these phrases in my language. When I translate directly, they really don't make sense. So it's really hard. I guess this is our like second language obstacle, like that it's going to be always there. And I embrace that too, like I tried at the beginning, but now like I start my semester right at school, and I tell my students, like, if you didn't notice, I have an accent, at the end of the class, where it's like, you're stuck with me. I'm sorry. But I'm always, there to repeat and to say things. And it's just a part of life and just a part of us immigrants, wherever we are, that we have to live with. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's such an inspiring and beautiful story. Thanks a lot, Borjana.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. It was my pleasure and honor to be here, being your guest, and I hope I didn't bore people to that.
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. I was captivated the whole time. That's why I was like so silent. It was like I usually talk more in the interview, but today I was just listening. And
thank you.
If people wants to get in touch with you, wants to know more about you, what you do, and maybe people relate with your story, wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, they can. There's my Instagram, Borjana Luboran. That's my handle. I think to begin with, that's the best way to contact me or stay in touch or find me. It's through the Instagram.
Yep, and guys, go check it out because she's got like a beautiful picture of Hawaii and very inspiring quote as well. So definitely check it out. You can find the link in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Borjana, to be on the show and share your story. I really, really, really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. You can find the show notes at emigrantlife.com/episode 40. If you like this episode and want to support the work we do, you can share this episode with your friends and you can leave us a review on Apple Podcast and Podchaser. Also, if you're planning to move abroad and need help or support, please send an email to daniels@emigrantlife.com and schedule a call with me. This is something I'm trying out. Don't worry, it's totally free. I just want to help as much as I can, so don't hesitate to reach out to me through my email or from our website, emigrantlife.com. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you in the next one. Ciao.